Now more than ever, Lowe's knows you don't just want a low price, you want the lowest price. And with our lowest price guarantee, you can count on us for competitive prices on all your home improvement projects. If you find a qualifying lower price somewhere else on the same item, we'll match it. Lowe's, we help, you save. Price match applies to same item. Current price at qualifying retailers. Exclusions and terms apply. Learn how we'll match price at lowes.com/lowest price guarantee.
You may get a little excited when you shop at Burlington.
What a low price! You see that? They have my favorite brand! It's like a whole new Burlington! I can buy two!
I'm saving so much! Yeah!
Burlington saves you up to 60% off other retailers' prices every day. Will it be the low prices or the great brands? Burlington. Deals? Brands? Wow! I told you so. Styles and selections vary by store.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Can I please have your attention? Can you dig it? Greetings, dear listeners. This is Jonah Goldberg, host of the Remnant podcast, brought to you by the Dispatch and Dispatch Media. We got this big memo from the suits in the podcasting department that said I am now supposed to put like a table of contents, kind of here's what we talk about today kind of thing at the top of this thing. So you may not hear me saying this at all because they may make me re-record the intro at the end to say this. I mean, but I have no idea what I'm going to talk about because I'm talking to Sarah Isgur. Sarah Isgur is my friend and colleague, host of the Advisory Opinions podcast, grand poobah of things legal at the Dispatch and the newly acquired territories of SCOTUS blog. There's much digesting going on in all of this, but so we haven't figured out all the nomenclature. But for our purposes, she's my friend and my law chick. So there you go. Sarah, welcome back to the Remnant.
Thank you. You know, I've been doing a lot of reading in my free time, trying to do some deep dives on like Valley Forge and some of the Revolutionary War battles. And so I sort of like the title like Colonial Governor.
I like that. Yeah.
Like I'm the Governor Hutchison, but instead of Massachusetts colony, I'm, of the Dispatch law colonies.
I love the title Major Domo, but
Sure.
It doesn't really apply to either of us. In a lot of my bios, it says I'm the Major Domo to my dogs. So that kind of works.
Well, the best title that's ever been given out in the history of the world, and I would love to read like a long form article on how this title, like how they workshopped this title is Supreme Allied Commander, right?
It's pretty awesome. That is pretty awesome. Although there are a lot of emperors in, Tsar of all the Russias, and all that kind of stuff that I could do a G-file on great titles in history. That would be fun. Note to self.
And this podcast is over. I already did my job.
There you go. My favorite thing is, because, I often, and we're going to get to the life advice portion later in the podcast, but I often will, try to explain to people how, except in some narrow circumstances, titles always take the money. If the choice is between a raise and a better title, take the money, because at a lot of institutions, you will, if they want you to be running things, you'll run them even if you don't have the title. And my favorite example of this is Deng Xiaoping, who's a little before your time, but he was the dictator essentially of Russia, head of the Chinese Communist Party.
You mean
China? Of China. Sorry about that.
If Mr. Ping was the head of Russia, I've got questions.
It's a good day for China. So as he started to shed all of his titles, he still ran China. He just didn't have the formal jobs. And I think his last title, where he was sort of like, there's a guy who was like the boss of Boston, whose only job was like sanitation commissioner or something like that. Deng's like final title was like head of the state athletic commission. And yet he was like telling the generals and the army and all these people what to do and all that kind of stuff. So there's like, I like humble titles too, if they're flex. But
so I think my life advice on this is a little different. It's neither the title nor the money. The answer should be your boss. You take the job based on not your boss's 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 boss. Like, nope, your immediate boss. That's how you pick the job.
That's fair. I mean, that's that I wasn't assuming that was an option in the I was thinking all other things being equal.
Fair. Yeah.
Take the raise. But, and again, there are narrow circumstances when that's not the case. But
sure. But we're talking about like this all comes out in the context of you're 22 and you're heading out into the world, right? So like not all the things that can happen later on in life when you're running China, when there's a flex option.
Yeah.
But I do think young people are often thinking only title versus money when they're looking at the different jobs that they're considering. And I would say like, you're missing some other variables because having a boss that wants to invest in you, believes in you, thinks you're special is worth less money and less title.
I think that's right. I think that's fair. That's fair. If they're not an idiot, right? Because what if it's a boss who thinks a lot of you, but he's wrong?
I don't even know. Like that's like some psychoanalysis couch stuff that would need to be like for you to know that your boss thinks you're special, but that assessment is incorrect.
Or just simply that him investing in you or her investing in you is
the boss has no juice.
A bad idea, right?
Yeah.
So I kind of think about this. So Irving Kristol, father of Bill, who's one of the big influences on me intellectually, he was legendary for being able to get people jobs. You know, like George H.W. Bush once gave a speech at AI about how throughout his entire career, if someone came in and just said, Irving sent me, you gave him a job, right? It was like that's the real reason he was called the godfather of neoconservatism, is that he was always putting people in places and stuff. But he was a brilliant student of contemporary society and of history and all that kind of stuff, but gave the worst life advice. He was just like legendarily bad at giving people personal advice. So like, go home, get married, make babies, that kind of stuff, when they're not, it was just not a relevant piece of it. That kind of thing. He would tell kids who had a 3.9 GPA at, Chapel Hill. I remember this once a girl I knew was in talking to her, and he looks at her and goes, Chapel, not a good school, go away. That kind of stuff. And he was a crank about a lot of things. But
so that's a different piece of life advice on the upper end. And maybe I'm in the wrong position to give this life advice, but I will give it nevertheless, which is at the lower end, base your job on your boss and what's going to be most fun, taking risks, all of that. Well, maybe we can get into more of that. But on the upper end, the money, the stats, all of those things won't matter nearly as much as the building an army beneath you. So like, yes, placing people in jobs, having a million mentees out there who say like, I owe, everything to Jonah, or Jonah's my intellectual, whatever, that is actually not just in the hereafter, although I think that as well, but in the now, you get that reputation of someone who has really invested in their community, their work community or otherwise. And I think that it helps you, actually. It can be a very selfish act in some ways. And yet it's shocking how few people will do it because they're like, well, I'm busy. I don't have time for those coffees or whatever else. And it's true, like everything's a trade-off. But I have tended to find that those people who have the army of mentees are doing pretty well.
Yeah, I try to be a cautionary tale for a lot of people, a negative role model. But all right, we will return to this. Put a pin in this. Let's get some substance out of the way because I can already hear the jabbering bandersnatches in the comments saying, what the hell's going on here? It's like you guys are just having coffee. So
I thought that's what this podcast was.
There's a lot of that here, and I think it's a feature, not a bug. But like, I want to satisfy everybody, so we're going to check some boxes, and then we'll get back to the fun stuff.
Isn't that another piece of life advice? Don't ever try to satisfy everybody.
Yes, I think we've already assumed that the people I cannot satisfy at all aren't listening to this podcast already. I'm talking about the narrow band,
the remnant.
Of remnant listeners. Yeah. So I'm trying to keep the tiny number of people in my wagon still in the wagon. All right. So one of my peeves these days is a very common talking point one hears sort of in Trump world in particular, that says, what about my due process rights? not to have to live with 20 million illegal immigrants. We've heard it from people giving congressional testimony. I think if you turn on Fox at the top or bottom of the hour, you'll hear someone say it. And I like to do little mental exercises of imagining, of replacing the phrase due process with random objects. Like, what about my low flush toilet? Because it makes as much sense to me. So anyway, maybe you can just sort of walk us through this. And also, you have a take on Kristi Noem saying that habeas corpus is the right for presidents to arrest people at will or some such. So why don't we start there?
Yeah. Okay. So first of all, I actually feel like I need to tell people that due process is spelled D-U-E, not D-O. And yet, depending on the context, it can be helpful to think of them in either way. Due process, D-O process, like do the process, is another way to think of this in your mind that will actually get you to probably the right place. Or it is the process that is due to one who is whose freedoms or whatever are being restricted by the government. There's 2 due process clauses in the Constitution. In the Fifth Amendment, it says, this is in the one about, you have the right to remain silent in the Miranda warnings. That's the Fifth Amendment. Nor shall any person be subject for the same offense to be twice put in jeopardy of life or limb, nor shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself, nor deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. There's a lot in the Fifth Amendment, by the way.
I'm a big Fifth Amendment fan.
Yeah. They stuffed a lot in there. It's a turducken of rights. This is about your life, your liberty, or your property being taken without due process of law in the Fifth Amendment. Now, let's go to the 14th Amendment. You're all going to now be familiar with the Section 1 of the 14th Amendment. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. That's your birthright citizenship clause that's in direct response to Dred Scott. Dred Scott in 1857. Then we have a big war, fighting. Then in 1868, they have to undo Dred Scott. So that's that first clause. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States. The privileges or immunities clause, Jonah. We could do a whole podcast on that. The Supreme Court wrote out the privileges or immunities clause at the turn of the century, and there's a whole lot of libertarians who want it back. So just, footnote that one. Nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. So the Fifth Amendment and the 14th Amendment have more or less the exact same language. One is about the federal government depriving you of things without due process of law, and then one is about the state government depriving you of due process of law. That 14th Amendment due process clause is actually why the state can't make laws against blasphemy or establish a religion, because we incorporate all of those Bill of Rights-y rights against the states through that 14th Amendment due process clause. Kind of, again, a legal footnote for everyone of why those Bill of Rights only were against the federal government infringing on your right to free speech or establishing a religion. And now all of a sudden, here we are. It's not the case pre-1868. States could have established religions. They could infringe on your free speech rights unless they had an amendment to that effect, which many of them did actually. But
some states had established churches. I mean, there was all sorts of that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Okay. So this is about, it's sort of like a version of habeas corpus. Like these two conversations are going to merge in a lot of ways. The history of habeas corpus from Magna Carta on is about, kings body snatching people and holding them and not telling anyone about it. And so Magna Carta, habeas corpus, due process, all are getting at the same thing, that the government cannot hold people without giving them some sort of legal process. There's no one above the law who can do that. So it is deeply annoying to hear people say, what about my due process rights not to live in a country with illegal aliens? Because it's like, it's it's annoying because it's hard to even explain why it's annoying. States have brought that lawsuit for what it's worth.
I mean, you could say, it would be rhetorically excessive, but you could say, what about my right not to live in a country with illegal immigrants, right? That's again, it wouldn't be technically legally right, but due process rights are
right. It's like the right to go
procedure.
Into court. Yeah,
right.
It's not the right to an outcome or the right to enforce a right, if that makes sense. It's only the right to be heard. And so, yeah, it's like, you want the right to go in and complain about illegal aliens? Okay, I guess. Again, like, there was a lawsuit that made it to the Supreme Court where the state said, more or less, that Biden wasn't enforcing a law by Congress that said that anyone who crossed the border illegally shall be detained. And the states are like, they're not shall detaining. They're letting all sorts of people in. And the Supreme Court said, yeah, but Congress didn't actually appropriate the money. You can't pass a law that's an impossibility. The president shall go to Mars once a year. Like, well, you can't then sue to enforce that. It's not a thing. So yes, we have this thing called private rights of action. There's all sorts of laws on the books that say things, but it doesn't mean you have a right to enforce those things or that you even have a right to those things. I think it will shock people to hear, for instance, that if there's a robber in your house who has a gun to your head and you call 911, you don't have a right for the police to come, which is kind of mind-blowing. So let's say the police know you're being robbed. They know your life is in danger. And they're like, yeah, I prefer to finish my coffee break. And by the time they get to you, you've been robbed and you're dead or something. You don't have the ability to sue them for that. Again, we're talking in some pretty broad strokes here, but there's cases on this. So yeah, so that's why the due process thing is annoying, because it's just people using words, as you say, Jonah, that they don't really know the meaning of. And I get it that it's annoying to hear from lawyers about private right of action. But I guess this is, if you're a Remnant listener, this is like the Chesterton's fence. There's all this law that's been built up over time. You could spend 3 years in law school to hear how we got there. And then more years after that, I'll tell you. Or you can trust that fence and the edifice that has been constructed, little stone by little stone, all the way up to, 5 or 6 feet, each stone was put there for a reason. And so, yeah, due process is not everyone's right to have all laws enforced.
Yeah, so on the habeas corpus thing, I thought it was funny when, I can't remember if it was Pam Bondi or Stephen Miller, they're so interchangeable, but when the Supreme Court had one of its many rulings recently, not too long, about a month ago, they said, oh, no, they didn't say these guys have due process rights. They said they have habeas corpus. And habeas corpus is a due process right. It is the due process right?
That's
it's
right.
it basically, all it says is you have to state a reason why you're arresting somebody and make sure, and the person you're arresting has a right to be able to say you got the wrong guy. That's it, right? That's basically habeas corpus. And so you listen to a lot of this stuff, and the desire to turn, I think deportation hearings should be more streamlined, blah, 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 blah. But we're not talking about $1 million trials for every deportation. But that is the way they want to portray it, to make it the argument for being able to actually suspend due process rights.
Oh, Jonah, this stuff gives me such a headache because, yes, exactly. So think of it in 2 different buckets. The INA, the Immigration and Naturalization Act. That's what we've been deporting people under this whole time, as I wave my hands around in the air. This says that you, in fact, instead of going into an Article 3 court, a federal court, in fact, you don't even have the right to that. The only process you are due, your due process rights if you come here illegally, are in an immigration court. These are not judges with life tenure. They are judges in the executive branch. You don't have the right to counsel, for instance. But you have the right to some process to go in and say, I have a credible fear of returning to my home country, or I'm not who they say I am, or, fill in your blank. We have thousands of immigration judges, and at various points, they have a backlog. I don't think it's crazy to pour more resources into that, hire more immigration judges, and get that backlog down to nothing. And if you're into immigration enforcement, you should be saying that at the top of your lungs, though it doesn't make a very catchy slogan. That's bucket one. Bucket two was the administration trying to say, that's too onerous. Instead, we want to use the Alien Enemies Act and have no process. We just put people on planes, yell, Alien Enemies Act, and then the plane takes off. And what the Supreme Court said was, no, everyone has due process rights because we have to make sure you have the right people. If you don't want to use that INA bucket through the immigration courts that are in the executive branch, it's like your own system that you created. If you don't want to do that, okay. If you want to use the Alien Enemies Act, this bucket two, then you have to go to Article 3 courts. That will take a lot more time. There are a lot more due process rights that are due when you're in a federal court. That's why it was, this almost Marbury versus Madison-esque, like, you win, but you lose. Like, oh, you can do that if you want, but there's no reason you should ever want to because you have a much better system, a faster system, and a cheaper system over here. But if you really want to use this, feel free. But then each person gets to file a writ of habeas corpus, and you've got to give them some amount of time to do that. And we don't know if the Alien Enemies Act can be invoked this way. So they sent it all back to the lower courts. And what the administration has now tried to do is like, mess around in the play and the joints in that. So like, okay, what if their right to timely notice to file their writ of habeas petition is 42 minutes? It's like, no, try again. Don't quote me on this, although we're literally quoting me on this. So Jonah, every court except one, I believe at this point, has also said the Alien Enemies Act can't apply because we're not under an invasion from Tren de Agua that has to be done by a foreign power. As in, it's not enough to say that a bunch of foreign gang members came into the United States. You have to say that basically the government of Venezuela has encouraged them, paid for them, and that it's an invasion. And that triggers these emergency powers of the president. Even if it applied, though, you would still need to give them the notice and ability to file writs of habeas corpus in Article 3 courts, which would be nuts because, again, you have the INA where none of that would be the case. Can we just spend a moment on the Kristi Noem, Senator Hassan habeas corpus thing?
So, Secretary Noem, what is habeas corpus?
Well, habeas corpus is a constitutional right that the president has to be able to remove people from this country and suspend their right to...
Let me stop you, ma'am. Habeas corpus, excuse me, that's incorrect.
President Lincoln used it.
Excuse me. Habeas corpus is the legal principle that requires that the government provide a public reason for detaining and imprisoning people. If not for that protection, the government could simply arrest people, including American citizens, and hold them indefinitely for no reason. Habeas corpus is the foundational right that separates free societies like America from police states like North Korea. As a senator from the live free or die state, this matters a lot to me and my constituents and to all Americans. So Secretary Noem, do you support the core protection that habeas corpus provides, that the government must provide a public reason in order to detain and imprison someone?
Yeah, I support habeas corpus. I also recognize that the President of the United States has the authority under the Constitution to decide if it should be suspended or not.
It has never
Let us be clear, though,
it has never been done. It has never been done without approval of Congress. Even Abraham Lincoln got retroactive approval from Congress.
Okay, so Jonah, what was sort of fascinating to me about this is, let's start with Secretary Noem's answer. What is habeas corpus? Habeas corpus is the right of the president to deport anyone he wants. I think if, let's say, Stephen Miller said that, or I said that, or you said that at a congressional hearing, we would assume that you were being a DICK. As in, we would think you were being snide, not that you didn't know what habeas corpus is, because we think you're a super smart person and also a little bit of a DICK. So it fits with our narrative of Jonah, but not with Secretary Noem. So the headlines blast out that she doesn't know what habeas corpus is. I mean, you guys just listen to it. I could go either way on it. I think she knew. I think she was trying to be snide. And you sort of see that in her answer later where she kind of repeats it. that she was basically like, yeah, just being sarcastic. Now, this is the next part that gets interesting to me. Senator Hassan then gives the definition of habeas corpus and says the leader, the president or the king or whomever else, has to say why they're holding you. And I listened to it and I was like, that's not the answer I would have given if I had been in congressional testimony. I would have given the answer that you gave earlier, Jonah. It's the right to force the government to say why they're holding you and to say that they're wrong and to have that little bit of process that like, I'm not the right person. It's like very, very basic process. You can't argue like, I didn't kill the guy. Nope, that's not a due process right.
It's like you got the wrong Jonah Goldberg. He's a dentist in New Jersey, right?
Yes. And so, but actually, Senator Hassan's answer is the correct one. Technically, the writ of habeas corpus, like historically, in its original form was only the right to force the king to say why you're being held. And in fact, this goes back to the 1625 case of the 5 knights where Charles I wants to raise taxes without parliamentary approval. Parliament says no. This was for his war with Spain because they wouldn't give him the bride he wanted. She didn't like him. He thought he was quite dashing. He was really upset to be spurned. So he wants to go to war with Spain, but that's really expensive. Parliament says, no, we're not having wars over your ego. And he's like, fine. And then he goes and tells all the nobles that he wants money from them. And they call it forced loans. It's a fun term. And then the nobles are like, nope. You can't tax us. Forced loans are taxes. You can't tax us without Parliament. And Parliament said no. So we're not giving you this money. And so King Charles I put 5 of them in jail at Fleet Prison. And they filed a writ of habeas corpus. And their argument was like the king wasn't even saying why they were being held, because, of course, if he did, it would be very clear that he was holding them unlawfully. Their lawyer made this, great argument. Magna Carta, habeas corpus, blah, blah, blah. The Chief Justice at the time was like, they are right, and sent a note to the king that they were right and that he may want to, fix this before the Chief Justice has to publicly say that they were right. So what happens? The king fires the Chief Justice because there is no such thing as an independent judiciary in 1625, and he puts in a different guy who's like, oh yeah, the king can definitely hold people indefinitely without charges, doesn't have to say, there's no right of habeas corpus in an emergency. Sound familiar? Fast forward, of course, King Charles.
Let's go year by year.
If you want to, because it gets crazier from there. Because the Chief Justice has now just said that King Charles can hold anyone indefinitely. People complain in Parliament. He then arrests them for complaining. They go to Fleet Prison, and it keeps repeating itself. He becomes more and more authoritarian. The independence of the judiciary has been gutted. The Magna Carta rights have been gutted. And so what happens at the end of this whole story? King Charles is beheaded. And in fact, the English are without a monarchy for 10-ish, 12 years, whatever that is.
This is when the real war on Christmas begins, because you have Oliver Cromwell who bans Christmas. And particularly in the jerks in Boston really go whole hog with that. But anyway, we're getting far afield. But
the point is, this fight over presidents or kings wanting emergency power to not do basic, you have the wrong guy process, has a long and pedigreed history. Donald Trump didn't invent this. And I just thought that, kudos to Senator Hassan for giving the actually historically correct answer instead of what we all would say today is the writ of habeas corpus.
Are you still quoting 30-year-old movies? Have you said cool beans in the past 90 days? Do you think Discover isn't widely accepted? If this sounds like you're stuck in the past. Discover is accepted at 99% of places that take credit cards nationwide. And every time you make a purchase with your card, you automatically earn cash back. Welcome to the now. It pays to Discover. Learn more at discover.com/credit card. Based on the February 2024 Nielsen report.
Starting a business can seem like a daunting task, unless you have a partner like Shopify. They have the tools you need to start and grow your business. From designing a website to marketing to selling and beyond, Shopify can help with everything you need. There's a reason millions of companies like Mattel, Heinz, and Allbirds continue to trust and use them. With Shopify on your side, turn your big business idea into... Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/special offer.
custom window treatments are a small upgrade that have a big impact. No better time to shop than now at Blinds.com's Memorial Day mega sale. Blinds.com invented a better way to shop for window treatments, completely online with upfront pricing, no showroom markups, no salespeople in your home. Choose from classic shutters to outdoor shades and more, all backed by our 100% satisfaction guarantee. Shop Blinds.com's Memorial Day mega sale now. Save up to 50% site-wide, plus a free measure. Rules and restrictions may apply.
So, for sure, it's nothing new for anarcho-libertarian dorks out there. Take out your copies of Robert Higgs' Crisis and Leviathan, which does the whole history of leaders using crises, basically wars, but or Great Depression, or more equivalents thereof, to aggrandize power. I agree with all that. In that tradition, though, I've heard versions of your defense of Noem. I don't know if that's the right word, right? Because one of my big peeves is people confusing, and I'm not saying you're doing this, confusing explanations for excuses. Like they think if they just tell you what their motives really were, that therefore that's an excuse. And it's like, no, I get it. You really wanted to steal that. Okay, you stole it. It's not an excuse. The idea that she actually does know what habeas corpus is and decided to tell Congress that she thinks it's the inherent right of presidents to deport anybody they want is not better than her not knowing.
Oh, no, I think it's worse.
Yeah, I think it's worse too. That's my point. But I think you're right about and I appreciate your ode to David Frenchism here by not cursing, because I'm trying to keep the profanity out of here. And it's been hard.
I don't even know if it's a profane word. I don't know if it's a curse word.
But the context, I think I hadn't really thought about it until you made the point. But Marco Rubio got all of these high marks for giving it back to the Senate in his hearing like the day before. And I think she got a little jealous of the buzz, or at least that's a plausible explanation about why, she was doing that.
It's like the Trump thing, right? I actually think people let him off the hook by constantly talking about how stupid he was. Donald Trump's not stupid, in my opinion, but even if he were, if your whole point is like he's evil, like it's a little hard to be stupid and evil. And so I guess my point with Noem is like you're letting her off the hook by saying she doesn't know what habeas corpus is. I think she does. I think that was her answer, knowing what habeas corpus meant. And like, that's bad.
That's worse. Yeah, no, it's worse.
Like she not knowing what habeas corpus is bad in a different way. Knowing what it is and basically denying that it exists, which is what she did, again, has this very long, scary historical pedigree. There's lots of people who don't know what habeas corpus is, and they haven't been particularly scary in history. It's the ones who know and want to ignore it.
Right. And it's not just that she didn't know. She described it like if she'd said, I don't know, that'd be one thing. But she didn't say, I don't know. She says confidently, habeas corpus is the right for presidents to deport anybody they want. And I think the way to think about that is if your civil libertarian hackles aren't raised by that, think about if someone said, do you know what the Fifth Amendment says? They said with confidence, well, the Fifth Amendment says the President of the United States break into your home at will or order the breaking into your home at will and take whatever he wants of your personal papers. People will be like, whoa, right? That's sort of the equivalent, right? It's not only getting it wrong, it's actually describing part of the thing that the protection signifies that it's supposed to protect you from, right? Like, what does a surgeon do? Well, he murders people slowly. I mean, it's the opposite thing. So before we get too far afield, am I crazy or is it, maybe it's just me. Maybe it's just my midlife, ennui. Is politics just not fun anymore? I just feel like we live in a moment where even my cynicism is inadequate to the task, because I just don't know that there's anybody out there in the political class who actually kind of says things that they believe. And so it all feels like kabuki now on both sides. Or is that just me? I mean, am I just in a dyspeptic mood?
No, I mean, you already know who you're asking this question to, and you and I have had offline conversations about this as well, that I am having trouble finding any sort of joy in Whoville, talking politics. My diagnosis, though, is that what made politics fun for me was having a set of rules by which we all play. And then, whether you're on the field playing or you're the ref calling, fouls, it's a game where we all agreed to the rules. But once you get rid of the rules, and once there's not a difference between the two teams in terms of following the rules, it's neither interesting to play nor to ref from the sides. And so what's the point? Like, oh, that team didn't play by the rules. So what? The other team didn't either. Yeah, I guess you're right. And, when I was in the world as a political operative, you're trying to advance the ball while playing in this sort of stricture of rules. If there's no rules and you can just punch someone in the face and move the ball down the field, that's not going to be my competitive advantage, at least. That's the least of the problems with that. But for me, I was well, someone's going to be able to punch harder. The only thing that I enjoyed about this, why I was good at this, is because I'm good at having all of these intricate rules and being able to work within that system better than others. But yeah, so I don't find this interesting anymore, let alone fun. But it's not even interesting if everyone can just take the price controls argument. Price controls are for sustainability on the left. Price controls are for masculinity on the right. I mean, you made this point, Jonah, and it's the best point ever. That's not fun to me. I'm not interested.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I guess the reason I'm more dyspeptic this week than last, because otherwise I just sort of what's changed. But I probably got a little out over my skis in the solo Remnant and the G-File last week, poo-pooing the media was in on the Biden thing. Upon reflection and an enormous amount of hate mail and texts and tweets and all that kind of stuff, but also some thoughtful criticism. I think there's a better case to be made that more people in the media were carrying water than I made it sound, blah, blah, blah. That's all fine. And we don't really need to get into all that because we'll probably do that on the Dispatch podcast tomorrow anyway. So
almost certainly.
Yeah. So, but the thing that bothers me is the concept of mainstream media is still being used to describe this elite establishment thing. We all know the kind of institutions we're talking about: New York Times, Washington Post, ABC, CBS, NBC, yada, yada, yada. Well, in this media climate, right, Fox is mainstream media if you're going to take ideology out of it, right? If you're just going to talk about market dominance, then this idea that the media is controlled by the liberal elite kind of doesn't work anymore. I listen to a lot of my friends and I read a lot of my friends on the right talk about and hold CBS and ABC to these standards that I think are perfectly fine standards to hold them to, and that a lot of mainstream media falls short of those standards. I've been doing liberal media criticism for 30 years. I get it, right? None of these people feel at all inclined to apply the same standards to right-wing media, right? To say, well, they're outraged by the water carrying from MSNBC. Oh, this is state media. And totally nonplussed, by the exact same kind of thing. I mean, it's price controls for thee and not for me. Liberal media, media bias for thee, but not for me. And I just feel like another chunk of the landscape that I used to find comfortable to talk about is now just yeah, but you got to look at both sides kind of thing. And that's exhausting.
It's interesting because there are plenty of moments where the folks on the right who were saying, most strenuously that Joe Biden wasn't up for the job, that he was, sick and all of those things were, quote unquote, proven right. But then you have to ignore all the other things they were saying, like Joe Biden was a pedophile, but they weren't proven right on that. And so, yeah, I mean, it leaves me a little bit, as you say, well, okay, if I give a laundry list of all the things I think my enemy is, and I give 99 things, and then it turns out my enemy is one of them, does that make me the hero of this story when the other 99 weren't right? Back at the, election of 1800, James Callender, Jefferson's like henchman dude, had all of these crazy things he was saying about John Adams. Some of which were pretty true. He was pompous and thin-skinned and all of those things. Check. Was he a hermaphrodite? No. So we don't go around saying like James Callender was proven right. Yeah. I feel like history will be pretty unkind to both sides down the line. But in the moment that you're living through it, it can be pretty annoying.
All right. As you know, your former babysitter.
She is best known.
As she's best known, my daughter graduated from college. I can now reveal that she went to Claremont McKenna College, which is not associated with the Claremont Institute. It was a grand day. She's a little, verklempt about it all, the party being over, even though it is not a party school. And she's got some other stuff to take care of. But yesterday, very impressive. Because she had to write a thesis. You'd love her thesis. You know what her thesis was on? The role of the tomboy in film, focusing on Joe from, Little Women? And she had to watch like 35 different versions of Little Women and adaptations and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, so she, between saying her goodbyes and getting all that stuff done, we got home on Monday and she slept. She went and saw a friend and then slept from about 1 a.m. I finally got her out of bed at 4:30 in the afternoon yesterday. And I would pay a lot of money to be able to sleep like that. Like I would cancel meeting. If you give me a pill that let me sleep naturally for like 16 hours, I would be very happy. Anyway, it put me in mind. We don't have to make an advice for my daughter, but like you're one of these mentoring type people. I get dragooned into that sort of thing from time to time myself. We are in college grad season. What advice do you have for college grads?
I think that a lot of college graduates feel like because the field is so wide open, they have to make all the right decisions. Because this is like a game of Plinko, right? Every decision takes you along a totally different path. So it needs to be absolutely the right one. And I think we're probably giving them the exact wrong advice. Now, I want to exclude here the teenagers and 20-somethings who, for instance, are responsible for a sibling or a sick parent or something like that. So, if you're in an exceptional circumstance, this doesn't apply to you. I'm talking about the median, newly minted college graduate out there. Now is actually the time to make mistakes and take huge risks that probably won't pay off. Because you have time. You have a safety net of your youth, frankly. Now, I don't mean go rob a convenience store and see if that works out for you. But taking a job that you may or may not like, or starting a company that probably won't work out, all of those things, now's a great time to do that. It will only get harder. And so if you've never tried the thing that you kind of always knew you wanted to do, you're not going to get to. This is it. And being in jobs that you hate will teach you so much because you're going to know exactly why you hate it. I hated it because my boss was X. I hated it because I literally had a job that I hated because the office was too cold. And I was like, wow, I never would have known this, but I cannot stay in this job because my fingers are blue every day. I'm wearing a winter coat. I'm holding on to a cup of hot tea and I can't focus because I'm the only woman in this building and like they're keeping it at 65.
Near perfect temperature, by the way.
I hate you. So, try the job that you don't know. Take risks on yourself because it's only going to get harder. And this feeling like you have to be perfect now, you will realize is a trap, a terrible trap. And so I wish we told kids more often to fail right now.
Yeah, I'm with you. I always tell people the best thing about being young is you could be entrepreneurial with your time. I cannot be entrepreneurial with my time anymore. And there's no such thing as wasted time, except unless you're like on a couch playing video games, and just, or getting high, right? That's in moderation. I'm not going to get too judgy about, but like if that's how you're spending your days, that's wasting time. But beyond that, like you get these kids, and this has been true since my generation. You get these kids who come out of elite schools who are in such an unbelievable hurry to get the next, to level up, right? And
yes,
on this weird path.
Life is a box checking exercise for their whole lives up to this point. And so then you release them into the world and they're looking for boxes to check.
Yeah. And I think that breeds a certain fragility as well. Like, we jump through all these hoops that you told me to. I'm very good at working this system. And now here, give me stuff. And if you don't give me the stuff that was part of this bargain, then I'm going to whine about it. And getting a job that you find out you didn't like is a great experience. In some ways, it's a better experience than getting a job that you do like, because that's how you could waste more time. Is it could take you a while to figure out that this is not the career path for you if you're enjoying yourself. The best thing I ever did was become a television producer for a little while. I loved it for a little while. And then the best thing about it is when my learning curve flattened out, I was like, I'm done. And knowing that about myself, I never have any regrets about like, oh, I could have gone and done that, because I knew I actually didn't like that much.
I want to give an extreme example here of a young person that I know who graduated from an elite institution. Again, his whole life had been checking boxes, and all of his friends are going off to consulting companies or hedge funds or law school or business school. And he said, I think I'm really athletic. I think I could be a professional golf player. And you're probably asking like, no, what was his handicap? No, he'd never played golf before. And he decided to move to California and give himself 1 year to see if he could become a professional golf player.
I'm betting it didn't work out.
Well, here's the thing. Like, people like me, I will fully acknowledge, we're kind of like, ugh, what a like privileged thing to do. I didn't use those words, obviously, but like in the back of my head, right? Like, what a dilettantish idea. And you're right, Jonah. After a year, he actually did get very, very good at golf. He could have, probably gotten a job at some small golf pro shops. But he was not going to be a professional golfer, at least in the...
Tiger Woods wasn't worried.
Yeah. And I realized at the end of this, when then he went off and got a real job and a different real job and all that, I was like, wait a second. He's doing this exactly right. Because he never has to look back and be that guy drinking a beer at the barbecue when he's 45 and has a bunch of kids running around going well, I mean, I probably could have been a professional golfer, but instead I'm an accountant. Because it was 1 year and it didn't matter. And it was fun. And yeah, he was broke. And what you have as a young person is you have time and not money. What you have as an old person is money and zero time, no time, and a lot of things, joyful things, hopefully, that take up your time. So realize what your resource is now and go spend that resource. Anyway, it's I like the story because he doesn't become a professional golfer. If he had become a professional golfer, it's not a very good story.
No, you had a friend who just bought lottery tickets every day. Right?
Yeah.
It's not great advice for anybody else.
What's great about this is nope, it did not work out. But some of it's also yes, all your friends will make fun of you or they'll look at you weird because they're going on to, get their MBAs and you're going and quote unquote wasting time. Screw them. Jonah, here's my question to you. Do you remember the moment, and maybe you were just born this way because you kind of seem this way now. Do you remember the moment when you realized that you didn't have to care about what other people thought of you?
Oh, gosh.
I do think it comes in waves. I think there's different age cohorts that you have it and then it expands. But I have a very specific memory.
So it's funny. This isn't quite the same, but I remember being really nervous in 10th grade about what classes I was going to be in with who, which cool kids, which not cool kids, and all that kind of stuff. And I remember having this, and I was nervous about it because I came up through the I know you're going to find this very shocking, through the nerdy bracket. And
Hard to imagine.
And I made the leap to the cool kid bracket, and I was desperate not to get sent back to be sent back down to the minors, right?
Which is the dirty secret of every cool kid. That's all they're living for, is to not get sent back to the minors.
There's a lot of truth to that. So I
never was one, but I was always their friend who they confided in how insecure they were about being cool.
Well, they're truly cool kids who are never worried about being sent back down to the minors, or what do they call it in soccer when you're in
Relegated?
Relegated. Yeah. They don't want to get relegated to the lower league. Those kids, they also tend to be the kind of people whose high watermark of their life was getting 3 touchdowns in one game in the high school football game, but I remember thinking, I'm being very nervous about it, and then being like, just something clicked in my head, and it was like, no, wait a second. I'm funny and I like me. I'll be okay. Whoever's in my class. I mean, it was something like that. It was just like, I can make the best of it because I don't actually care. It doesn't matter as much who I'm with and kind of thing. But beyond that, in the sense that you're talking about, it's been an unfolding series of lessons. I think after my first book came out and was a big success, and I realized I didn't like most of the things that I thought were going to be the things I would love about it. Like, I was so looking forward to the book party and all that kind of stuff. And then I had the book party and I'm like pretty miserable and just want to go home. That was a good epiphany for me. It's like, I know what I want to do,
Okay, Jonah, I have another question for you. I need this advice for some of my mentees now. So we talked about their life up to this point has been box checking exercises. And let's assume they didn't, really take my advice. They've continued checking boxes and they're excellent at it. They are now at the top of all of the checked boxes that a young person can possibly have within their age cohort. Well, there's this other box to check called marriage and family. And I'm finding it difficult to give advice on how you know the difference between real, sustainable, but crazy, amazing love that you can build a family on with another person, and 2 people who are really good at checking boxes and now believe that this is the next box to check. They are deeply fond of each other and dedicated to checking this box together. How can do you have a way to verbalize the difference? Because I'm not sure I do. How do you know when he's really into you versus when he just thinks that you'll make a good first lady?
That's an interesting question. So, this is a little off. I'm just trying to think it through because we Coopers and Libran kept these questions secret until we went live. So I did not know this was coming. So the question is, how does a woman know that this just isn't like the David Brooks chick sports pages wedding announcement kind of wedding, right? Where it's
mergers and acquisitions.
Yeah. Where like McKinsey marries, Bain kind of thing. Right. So, I think there's a lot of room for different personality types and all that kind of stuff. So I don't want to be declarative about anything. But I think a really good tell is the little gestures. If there's some sense that you're actually on his mind and he shows it in small ways, I was dating pre-text. So texting wasn't, there was a little AIM AOL instant messenger action going on, but not a lot. But I think, if there are little gestures, like Jess knew I was into her because I was often sneaking her little notes, just little tiny notes that said still silly things. And I think, the thing that comes to mind is, I have a friend whose husband died, and she said, and I asked her how she was doing, and she said, it's fine. I have lots of people I can do things with. I don't have anybody I can do nothing with. And I think figuring out if he's the guy is whether or not you're both happy doing nothing, right? Just the stupid little, not going out tonight, not doing anything, we have to make an appearance at these 3 people's houses and all that kind of stuff, right? Not the social calendar stuff, the downtime stuff. And because that's a big chunk of marriage is going to be the downtime stuff. And if all you are is having meetings where you're planning your schedules, then that's mergers and acquisition stuff, I think. That makes sense?
It does. I wonder whether the public persona of a man that tends to be serious or intellectual or all of the, business oriented, if he's really into you, the private version of that guy should be really like squishy. Like, like he should basically be just like a little puddle who's constantly like just excited to be near you. and that should be a really different personality than the one he shows publicly.
So my wife calls this the bait and switch. Because I was a different persona. And then once things got going, it turns out I'm a giant softie about animals and all sorts of other things and very silly. And it took her a while to realize that she liked that, because she was like, I thought you were this like pompous, dickish guy, and I was attracted to that.
I signed up for that, yeah.
And then it turns out you're not. And then she's like, what the hell? Bring me back those toasted cheese sandwiches I ordered. Sorry, it's a jerk reference. No one remembers that anymore. What are the signs for you? Like, what are the signs that the guy? What do you tell these young ladies? Let's put it that way.
So I find this really hard, right? Because like I can't be in their relationship, so I don't know what things. It's like the Heisenberg principle, right? By definition, I don't know what it's like when it's just the two of them. I can go on double dates with them, but that means I'm getting the public persona. Yes.
Right.
So I don't know what's happening, and I can only take their version of it, and they're not reliable narrators in either direction. Either they tell me only the bad stuff, because why would you just tell me like, oh my God, we had so much fun doing nothing? That'd be a weird conversation to have. Or they only tell me the good stuff because they're trying to convince me that this is the one. So that part's really hard. And you don't want to be the person that's like, don't marry that guy unless it's really extreme. And I only have the experience I have. So like, I don't know what everyone else's happy marriage is like. I don't know what you and Jess are like when I'm not around. That sounds weird.
Because it's so rare.
The threesomes are one thing, Jonah, but like, what's it like when it's just the two of you? I assume not every happy marriage is exactly the same. So I don't know how to give advice of like, here's what the signs were for me. But I will say what's interesting about your description, Jonah, is boy, is it similar to mine. Really similar. Scott is a very serious, assertive, but nevertheless quiet person publicly, and how I met him. The strong, silent type, like a, cowboy. And, privately, he's a total squish. That squish we use in like this political sense now. I mean, like, he's squishy and cuddly and has, cute things to say. And like, and I guess that to me, you're right, is like, if I'm seeing the different version, that means he's into me. He's showing me something.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
That he's showing vulnerability because, all those things. He feels
comfortable that it's safe to do that.
Or is so desperate for my love and affection that he's willing to take the chance.
For sure. Yeah. But those things, I don't think you can unbundle them in some ways,
That's
right? Because like it's a leap of faith thing.
But I'll say what he doesn't do. He doesn't give presents. He doesn't bring flowers. Like that's not his thing. In the like 5 love languages. But I don't know what is. I know how all men, I think the 5 love languages book is so funny because like women all need to read it to be like, oh, am I words of affirmation or acts of service? And men don't need to read the book. We know what your love language is.
I've not read the book. I'd heard the phrase before. I didn't even really know it was a book.
Well, here, Jonah, let me tell you what the 5 love languages are. And you generally receive love in the same way that you give love. And so the thesis of the book is actually for your partner, you need to give love maybe in the way that they receive love, not in the way that you receive love. And that can be different. So the ways that one can receive love are words of affirmation, right? You did a great job. You're so beautiful. I love you. Acts of service. You take out the trash every week and you never need to be asked because that's the thing that you know she hates to do, or you kill the bugs, which obviously you wouldn't be married to me. Quality time. Like he just really wants to sit next to you on that park bench and he'll do his crossword and you read your novel. Gifts. He brings you flowers all the time. He's just thinking of you constantly and he knows you love this croissant. And physical touch. So that's what I mean. That's the joke, is that like all these women are trying to figure out which of the 4 they are. And then they make their poor husbands read the book. And the husband's like, I didn't need to read that book. I know which one I am.
Yeah. We don't need to dwell on that.
put us in a box. Go ahead. That just gives us something to break out of. Because the next generation 2025 GMC Terrain Elevation is raising the standard of what comes standard. As far as expectations go, why meet them when you can shatter them? What we choose to challenge, we challenge completely. We are professional grade. Visit GMC.com to learn more.
Comcast is committed to bringing access to the internet to all Americans, including rural communities across the country, like Sussex County, Delaware.
We were being left behind. Everybody around us seemed to have internet, but we did not. High-speed internet is one of those good things that we needed to help us move our farming, our small businesses, our recreation forward.
Learn more about how we're bringing our next generation network to more people across the country at ComcastCorporation.com/investment in America.
I saw this video on social media a couple months ago, and I gotta say, it was this chick explaining how to keep her husband, and it was not porn, how to keep her husband happy, and she had this explanation that I'm not saying resonates with everybody, but it definitely resonates with me, and it's that men don't like chores, but they love quests. Men want to be given some sort of difficult task that will make their wives happy. It's really stupid, but it's really true. And I know it's definitely true of me. It's weird. I am really bad about chore stuff. And this is a source of much domestic discord. But I am great. The second Jess says I need something from the store, so I'll go. And I'll go get it. And I never complain about it. Sometimes I go to the store 3 times in a day. We have this tradition whenever we're in a hotel someplace, I always get up early and I go get breakfast and coffee and I bring it back. It's just, I'm a quest guy. Give me some sort of thing to go do and I will do it. But the mundane, repeatable chore stuff, I'm bad at. And I think there's just a lot of dudes who are like that.
So Jonah, I'm giggling because right before I came on this podcast, I saw husband of the pod in the hallway and I said, oh, hey, I can't get, somebody undid the hose in the front and I can't get the threads. It's so annoying to thread that hose on the faucet thing. And I was like, do you think you could do that? And he was like, does it need to get done right now? And I was like, no. You can do whatever and then do it. And he goes, well, does it need to get done today? And I was like, no, I don't think so. So the big question is, he's left for a plane since we started this podcast. So he had about, let's call it 20 minutes that he could have done that or he could have done something else. And we will find out after this podcast whether that was a sufficient quest. It had some key attributes of a quest, though. I couldn't do it. I tried and I failed and I was frustrated about it. That's a good basis for a quest, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's possibly necessary, but not sufficient.
Yeah. Okay.
But in part, because part of it is, I think the male thing of you hear this a lot from people who are divorced about how, divorced dads are really great at the big gesture, but are bad at the little thing, right? The showing up stuff, right? And I think that's part of the same male psychology is go out and slay a beast for me and bring me back the fur, is part of the male psyche for good or for ill. And I think knowing that about dudes is probably and it's also a good way for these young women that you're talking to test whether or not they're into you, because satisfying fulfilling the quest is something that you really want to do when you're trying to really impress somebody, when you're trying to, or testify to your commitment to them.
Yeah. You're not going to go slay the dragon unless someone's going to be someone you want their admiration is going to be admiring that. Right. You're not gonna go slay the dragon for some chick you met at Bennigan's, right? It's got to be someone that you're kind of serious about. I loved Bennigan's. I didn't mean to diss Bennigan's. I was going to say Hooters, but that conjured a whole different thing. Different vibe. So, yeah. All right, we've given very little advice that my daughter could use because she is not planning on getting married anytime soon. Although I would be very happy. I think people get married too late and have kids too late, and I understand all the reasons why. They apply to me. They apply to my wife. They apply to lots of people I know. But at the same time,
Like, wouldn't you rather be if you could have done all the other things, and I know this is an impossible thing, dealing with your kids now, wouldn't it be easier if you were 5 years younger?
So, yes and no. I thought where you were going, like, I absolutely wish that every life experience I had with Scott.
Sure, there's that too.
I wish I had been able to share everything with him. Although, of course, like, telling each other old stories from the before times has its value too, because you get to kind of embellish and whatever. But you know, you got to become the person you need to become and all of that. I'm actually not sure. The kid thing is hard. I'm coming around to the idea that you should either have kids very young or very old. That, like, I don't think I want to back up 5 years to have kids, because if you have them like right at the beginning of your career, they kind of get woven in. And if you have them at my point, you have a lot more flexibility. Sort of the worst time I think you could have kids is at that peak where the lines cross in terms of time, improving yourself, and everything else that usually comes in your mid-30s.
Yeah. I mean, I'm one of those few people who kind of liked the movie Parenthood even when it first came out. And I kind of think that it's just a roller coaster and get used to it kind of attitude more people should have. And the box checking people, kids are not really conducive to the box checking.
No, they are not.
And if you're going to go into life like that, you're either going to see your worldview blown up by your kids, or you're just going to have a really, really hard time with the kids because they just don't fit that. And although I see this, I mean, you're at the stage now. How old are the Munchkins?
The oldest will turn 5 in about 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And the youngest will be 21 months on May 1st.
So where we live, you know where we
June
live.
1st.
June 1st, so soon.
Yeah, he'll be 21. So but he's rounding 2, basically. So 5 and 2.
Because, not to go all Jonathan Haidt, but the degree to which youngins, particularly in sort of affluent elite communities, have their lives managed as if it was a box checking exercise. Like the free range kid thing. Lucy's turned out to be a really great kid, but young woman. Ugh. But she walked right into the teeth of the whole iPhone, social media age, right? She's 22 now, so she was like a tween when the iPhone is introduced. She's an only child, so we got her one. If I could do all that over again, I would have done it very, 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 very differently and been more free range about everything. But it's hard in our community where like kids have like 2 weeks where they're like on their bikes in the neighborhood, and then everything else is like practices and camps and tutors and schedules and stuff. And I hate all that stuff, but it's like the nature of the beast in that world. And I think that's problematic. That's what creates box checking kids.
I was totally wrong about what kids were. Totally wrong. I thought kids would be little versions of us, different percentages of each of us, perhaps, but nevertheless, it would just be a combination of us. And like, no. So our oldest, it's really fun. He will not do something until he wants and is ready to do it. So like reading, bike riding, name your thing. He will just announce one day that now he can do this thing. And you're like, what? And then you go out and he now can do this thing. So like, I was like, hey, do you want to do Little League? Because Little League is like the social thing. And all of his friends are doing Little League. And he was like, nope. I was like, oh, are you sure? Like these other kids are. And he's like, nope. So he, not that you let your kid like direct your parenting in all things, but for this type of thing, he really seems to know his own mind. Yeah. And so like, yeah, we're not signed up for anything. We don't do any classes or sports or anything else right now. He likes going to the park, hiking, throwing rocks in water. And I love that.
Well, who doesn't like that? I mean, throwing rocks in water is one of the most underappreciated.
Oh my God,
pastimes.
I love it so much. It's my favorite thing to do with my kids is go throw rocks in water. You can do it almost anywhere.
One of the things Lucy loved to do, which we really encouraged, was when it rained, to dig the trenches to make little rivers and then dam them and do all that stuff in the mud in the backyard.
Yes.
That's a lot of fun.
Yes.
Yeah.
Really relaxing.
Yeah.
High zen.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I agree. The problem, it's like social media. If everyone else is on it and you tell your kid they can't be, but that's where all the social planning is. It's not, you're not some like hero parent that your kid now doesn't have any social plans and you kept them off the phone. So it almost has to be done as a community, and that can be hard.
All right. Well, I didn't plan on getting into parenting advice because I have little to no use for it anymore. And this is
I'm seriously one of, like, I try very, very hard. Like, you see parents doing something atrocious in your view. If they have a kid who is any older than my kid at any point, and I hear myself, my inner monologue going, I would never, I just take it back. Until you're at that age, you have no clue what you would do. You have a different kid. You have do not judge other parents is my new mantra.
Yeah. I mean, I have so much grace for parents on planes. I don't like listening to the crying, right?
Nobody does.
Nobody does. But been there. And it just is what it is. And I want to live in a society where the sounds, you just hear kids all over the place, right? I think it's a better society when you hear kids running around. And that means society has to have a lot more tolerance for kids. So I do get a little judgy. I have to be careful because some of these people are friends of mine, even though it's now 20 years later. When your kid is at the diner, when you're feeding your kid and they make a massive mess and then you just leave it for the staff to take care of. I guess
I don't really think that's parenting. I think that's just rude because that's not about your kid.
It's poor citizenship. Right?
That's right.
And I get it. Picking up the soggy pancakes out of the rug is kind of difficult when your kid's running around. So at least leave a giant tip if you leave a big mess. So.
Right. I just remember thinking before kids, of course my kid will eat what I eat. We're not going to have kids that eat dino chicken nugget nonsense. Fast forward. And I have a friend and her kid eats, kale and salmon and all of those things. And I think that she thinks it's from good parenting. I will give her some credit, because she's making healthy dinners every night. That absolutely is part of it. But no, you could make quinoa, kale, and salmon every night. And my kid's not very food motivated. He just wouldn't eat it. And different kids, it's not always your parenting. You are not in control of all the things. You did not make all the right choices. You did not make all the wrong choices. I find that as he gets older, I already started at 90% nature. Now I'm at 97% nature over nurture. And it's a very freeing realization.
Yeah. Although the nature nurture thing doesn't have to be an argument about pure genetics or anything like that. It's just that the wiring, some of the, I'm with Paul. I had Paul Bloom on here recently, and we got into a whole other new thing about nature and nurture stuff. And I think even if it's only 3% nurture, that 3% can yield all sorts of unanticipated weird, can activate aspects of the nature that another version of nurture wouldn't, right? And so it's just difficult to sort of be glib about, it's all this or it's all that. It's it's part of it's just unfriggin' knowable, which drives you crazy.
Yeah, if I kept him in a basement and never introduced him to anything, obviously that would be different. You're right. I'm including almost the introducing him to all sorts of things still as part of nature, because I can introduce him to tennis, basketball, soccer, whatever. I'm not considering that nurture though, because he likes basketball. I don't have the choice to make him love baseball.
Right. No, that's right. You have the choice of what to expose him to, but how he responds to what you expose him to is on him.
Yeah. And I'm considering that part of the 97%. You're right. I do have a choice of what to expose him to. I'm not going to expose him to crack.
Right.
Maybe he'd love it. I don't know.
But it's the food thing, right? I mean, he's going to like the food that he likes to a certain extent. But you have a choice of what food you expose him to. The problem is, once he tastes the McNugget, he's not going back. That's the problem.
That was my dad. But he loves cucumbers, red peppers. He'll request that anytime. He likes healthy food. He's just very specific about what he likes. But everything else I'm telling you, he knows exactly what he likes, and it's not all trash.
Yeah.
He's just kind of odd that he likes sushi.
Really?
loves sushi. Edamame and salmon avocado sushi. Thinks that's a real treat. And chicken nuggets.
Wow. Again, chicken nuggets, I mean, very hard to turn your back on those. Well, just, I want to be really clear, and we need to get out of here, and I don't need to keep this long, and I don't know that we've really clarified anything for anybody, but I figure anybody who's still listening is enjoying listening to it, and if they're not, then they've left.
And why did they keep listening?
Yeah.
What are you, at the dentist's office? You can't hit your pause button?
But I can tell you this right now with absolute confidence, 15, 16 years, you're going to remember this conversation where I told you the time between now and them graduating from college is almost instantaneous. In retrospect, and it's particular, like my iPad throws up pictures from, 2008 and 2015 or whatever. And for me, this is like, oh yeah, I remember that primary, or whatever, and like, it's not that long ago, whatever. But then you get these pictures of Lucy where this was half a lifetime ago, or more. And she was a completely different creature. And for her, that's a long time ago. And for me, it's a blink of an eye. And it's really weird.
I had 2 very different Sundays. Last Sunday was like the most perfect Sunday. And I realized that I wasn't really going to remember this day in 10 years, in 1 year, probably. And I was like, and that's the way we work. That's the way it's supposed to work. You have this wonderful, gorgeous day. The weather's perfect. The kids are having fun. They're just full of joy and curiosity. And it's just an incredible day. And you're not going to remember that. And then the Sunday before it was the opposite. Mm-hmm. There's like screaming at me and like throwing things and everything's a mess and I'm frustrated and they're frustrated. And I thought to myself, I'm not going to remember this day. And I'm going to look back and think of what little angels they were and how much I miss this age. And it's because I don't remember today.
Yeah.
And it was like, that's the reason, right? That's the reason we don't remember all of the great day. We don't remember all of the bad day because we're just supposed to look back and think, kids, that's great.
I should leave it there, but I want to make you feel old. So I saw this maybe I put it in Slack. I can't remember, but it's very depressing to me. Raiders of the Lost Ark came out at perfect age for this guy, right? Like I was 11, 12, something like that. Saw it with my dad, just huge. That was 1981, set in 1936. If you're going to make a remake today to have the same time gap, you would set it in 1981. That really bums me out.
I think about that all the time. Like for some reason, for me, it's the distance from when I was born to the Kennedy assassination, because I was very aware of it, but also it seemed like it had happened 200 years before I was born.
Yeah.
And like 9/11 is so much further back for my kids than the Kennedy assassination was for me.
Yeah. I do think it's weird though, because I remember my dad telling me that World War II seemed really present, like in the moment, like it was 1970s or early 80s, something like that, when he was telling me this. And, but he said, even when he was a kid, and my dad was probably born in, I want to say 33, World War I seemed like a million years ago, even though like it was, 15 years ago by the time he was aware of what it was, something like that. It was not a long, long time ago, and 18 years, but it seemed like from another world. And there is a weird way in which our memory of the past is not chronological that way. It's like some things just really do seem further away than they should, and some things don't.
There's a dumpster with history that's behind us when you're young, especially, because you've got to kind of start parsing all that out and filling in the years. But this is why, Jonah, my synesthesia comes in very handy, because as I build knowledge, it almost becomes a physical library of how the past worked.
I forgot, like you think like the number 13 tastes like, like grape soda or something like that, right? Some crazy stuff like that.
But it makes history really fun because like there's all sorts of empty spaces, but then I like put things in them.
It's very strange. Very, 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 very strange.
I can like go physically visit them in my mind.
Yeah, just so people understand why I think he might be a serial killer. Give people a concrete example of what this means.
The most common form of synesthesia is the physical representation of time. So, for instance, a year for me is a counterclockwise circle. The months aren't actually even. July is at noon, and January is at 5 p.m. But again, it runs counterclockwise. The more unusual and fun ones are that you associate letters with colors or numbers that way. And for those people, they tend to be excellent at music, memorization, because, and it's hard to explain, but it's the same way that it's easier, Jonah, for you to remember the lyrics to a song than to a poem. If you combine a second sense, it would seem like it should make it harder to remember stuff. But in fact, it makes it a lot easier. So that's how it works.
Okay.
That's where we're ending.
That's on that uplifting note of bizarreness. Sarah Isgur, thank you for doing this, and talk to you tomorrow morning. So, I'm not going to get all worked.
I'll miss you, Jonah.
Oh, so my theory. I was talking to Leon Aaron about this yesterday. My theory about why the Trump phone call went for 2 hours with Putin is because they just kept saying to each other, "No, you hang up. No, you hang up." All right, we're done. Sarah Isgur of Advisory Opinions and SCOTUS blog and all sorts of other, and ABC and all that jazz. Thank you again for doing this.
Thank you.
All right. Sarah's gone. I will follow up on some of the Easter eggs I dropped around here on the solo. I just want one clarification. I let her get away with it, but in no way is her husband of this pod. Just want to be really clear about that. Not that there be anything wrong with that. It's just like that's the term she uses when she's on AO, and she got, confused. But so the other point, you guys heard me say this before, but we didn't dwell on the life advice for youngins. The other way I always put it is the great thing about being young is you can afford to be poor. And I know that can sound, for people of limited means and we're finances are a real struggle. I don't mean to be dismissive of all that. I just mean among sort of the college educated kids that I run into in my world, who are going to be okay, right? Because again, college education does not guarantee success. It's kind of like democracy. It's a hedge against bad outcomes. It is not a guarantee for good outcomes. You educate your kids so they have a pretty good chance of not being poor. You don't educate your kids necessarily because you think that's the guarantee route to great wealth or anything like that. And so anyway, the thing about your early 20s is you can afford to do interesting things. And now if you got a lot of student loans and all these kinds of things, I grant all those caveats, but you have a little time to kick the tires on other stuff. Who cares if you're eating ramen noodles? I mean, part of the problem, my daughter had is that she went to a school where a lot of people are going on investment banking and consulting and all that kind of nonsense. And so they're all box checking in a hurry to get rich. And I don't want that stuff rubbing off too much on my daughter. And it didn't, which I'm glad about. But doing something weird, interesting, adventurous for a little while is something you can afford to do when you're really young, because the next time you're going to be able to do it, if at all, is when you're retired. Unless, you're some blithe spirit who has a completely different life philosophy. But I'm talking about kind of kids and kind of people I'm talking about. So, but we can do another advice thing down the road. And beyond that, thanks for listening, and I will see you next time.
No, you won't. This is a podcast.